welcome to today's blog. So we've got a few visual lights here today. We're talking about communications etiquette. So the question about what to use and when has been going around a while. What we thought might be interesting is to see where this sits today in 2020. So we've had a good few months of COVID now. We've all had to get new ways of working. Technology's moved on, so we just thought now might be a good time to revisit this question and sort of see what people are doing. So what we're going to be doing is taking a quick look at the tools and where they are, and then get into sort of what people's pet peeves, pet processes, tips, etc. are, and then see how they might fit into what you might be able to do and how you might be able to improve things within your own organisation. So we'll let's get this kicked off. So quick overview of the technologies then. So obviously we're talking about collaboration tools here. So in 2020 we've moved away from Skype now, so we're fully into Teams. We're talking about Outlook, so obviously that's hasn't gone away. That's going to be there for a while longer, at least. And then obviously Yammer as well. So that's something we've started to use a lot more within Visual recently. We've had that sort of restarted, having some great success with that. So that's been another sort of feature of why we've done this today. So how has that changed things, and how that could change things for you as well. So yeah, I don't know if we want to do like a round table on what people's sort of thoughts are on communications etiquette now in 2020. I don't mind starting. So from my perspective, email is one of those things that's a security risk for me. So I come from a security background. So for me, email represents phishing attacks and all those sorts of nasty things. From my perspective, it's one of those. It's something, especially if you've been in an organization for a while. Your inbox is going to be rammed. You can have hundreds of emails a day. You're going to miss stuff. So I mean, for me, it's one of those. If someone's got something urgent and they need to get through to, what winds me up is where you receive an email and it's like, people assume that you've read it and then actioned it, or maybe, you've got a busy working day. I'm in the middle of stuff, maybe another day rolls around, maybe I haven't got to my email until later in the evening or something, and something maybe that's important gets dropped. And then, a couple of days later, you'll get like a ratty message saying, what have you done with that? I didn't know about it, So that's one of my pet peeves. I don't know if you want to go around the table on other people's feelings on things that don't work.
I'll go next. Yeah, so for me, again, going on the email side, I think most people that speak to me or know me know that if you're going to email me, probably you're not going to get a response anytime soon, because I now only have Outlook open 3 times a day. And that's one of my little tips, really. And when I speak to quite a few clients, they always go, oh, I wish I could do that. But I think it's training the people that you collaborate with on a regular basis, training them that's with the actions that you take. So if someone does message me on Teams, I will respond. If I'm not busy or I'm on do not disturb. So you're training other people on how to collaborate and communicate with you. So now I see that most of my communication and collaboration is in Teams now, and I get a minimum amount of emails. So that's been a really positive change. And over the last couple of weeks, I've really been pushing the do not disturb and focus time as well, because obviously at the minute it can get overwhelming. People are popping up left, right and centre and everyone's really busy. But people are really starting to respect that do not disturb as well. So that's probably one of the things that has changed for me, because it used to be one of my pet hates, was if people used to try and pop up or ring you or pester you when you're on do not disturb if you're using it properly. And then for me, the introduction of Yammer has really taken the noise out of Teams. So the more social side, the more chit chat side that you'd usually have in the office or with your team or with groups of people with common interests, we started that off in Teams, and obviously all those notifications going on, it was quite hard to manage. So I think that's really helped with the separation between work, project stuff, notifications you really need to know about are in Teams, and then you digest the Yammer notifications when you've got time.
That's a really good point, isn't it? So we, in terms of as a IT consultancy, obviously a lot of our chat is about IT news and IT updates, and by moving all that to Yammer has really, taken that edge off Teams, because now Teams being something that notifies you about stuff during the day is now not so much of an issue. You know, if you get a notification through Teams, it's typically because it's about something that's relevant or important. Whereas moving on stuff to Yammer, yes, it's still there, it's still available. You know, it's not lost on email, but it's, you know, it's off to the side.
It's probably worth commenting that there were a lot of people, both inside and outside Visual, when we started looking at Yammer, that were interested in why we were doing this and saying, but you know, we're going the other way, we're going all in on Teams, and it's not a one size fits all, but there was an argument that for a company our size, then maybe we were overcomplicating things. I think it's been pretty successful, actually. We're about a month into the relaunch of Yammer now, and the view we took was that we consult with clients who are larger than us, and we have to act and operate like they would, and basically walk the walk as well as talk the talk. And so that's why we took the approach we did. Some people are confused by the what goes where, and I think maybe we'll come back to that later in the conversation. But generally it seems to separate things quite nicely. It's the internal project team or organizational team kind of conversations are happening in one place, and the wider communications, the external stuff, the interest stuff is happening somewhere else. And as for email, I get very little internal email now. Most of what I get is notifications, but certainly little that requires action.
Yeah, I think sorry, Karen, go on.
I was just going to add my penneth in there. I really like the change that we've made between Teams and Yammer to separate the two different types of communications. I just think seem less cluttered to me, and that for me is important. And you know, what you're going to be able to find in Teams is informational and for contribution as well to group ideas and group discussions. Whereas Teams actually can be a communication method internally, but also with clients. I think for me at the moment, the frustration I've got is that a lot of our clients are still on Skype, and that means that we can't communicate with them via Teams, not easily. And so I'm hoping that that's going to be resolved in the not too distant future. Email for me is still a fairly big part of my working day. I would absolutely encourage more Teams communication if it was generally more available, so federation with more clients, etc. So the other topic that we've not touched on is SharePoint as well, of course, and that's got its own discussion capabilities, but I guess that's how you will probably cover off something later, Gavin, around what you put where.
Yeah, I mean,
I've got a diagram I can throw up if you like.
Yeah, well, I mean, just before we do, I think we had some really good tips from Abby around, you know, pet processes. One of the things she reminded me of was, I don't do it in this role, but in the previous role, I used to have a collaboration policy that I had on Sway. So it's like a link that I could share with people. So in terms of like educating people about sort of how to manage me or communications with me, you know, here's my policy, my collaboration policy. But it's similar sorts of things, and it was something like, if you've got something urgent, obviously IM me or call me. But then things like, if it's an email that's got an action on it and you don't get a response within 3 days, it's probably been lost, or not lost, but as in, you know, it's moved to the back of the queue. I've moved on, you know, life rolls on. Now that's going to be easier in some roles than others. You know, a particular role that I was in at that point, you know, I could do that. I don't think in a consulting role I could do that. You know, we need to be on top of things, but you know, moving people away from email as a default, you know, in all situations, that's sort of what we're trying to do. So that sort of that set of tips that I found really useful, because I saw that also when you do a Sway, you can sort of see what the stats are, and I was noticing that people did read it, you know, did have views on it. So that's quite a useful thing to have, you know. And then that was just a link that I had in my signature, you know, so whenever I sent it people an email, they'd say, oh, what's that? Click on that, and there's that information. So it's quite handy.
It's interesting you say it. It's something I've been thinking about doing for a while. I've just looked and seen that I wrote a blog post 6 years ago about my email SLA, which was, you know, something I put in my signature. I don't do that here. We have auto-generated signatures here. I have started to add a line in about, you know, upcoming leave and about that I don't normally work Fridays and things like that. So it's sort of going some other way. But I might adopt Gavin's approach of using a sway, actually, of you know, how to work with Mark, a user guide for Mark, sort of.
Yeah. I mean, the other elements that, because we said, you know, about COVID, and actually one of the things that, I mean, in my house, so for example, I'm an IT consultant, and, you know, I do obviously the tasks I need to do during the day. I'm lucky in that, you know, we happen to have 3 young kids. We're doing homeschooling, and I have an amazing wife who's good at homeschooling. So, you know, I'd be completely hopeless at that. So, you know, thank goodness for her. But she also runs her own business. So at 4 o'clock each day, I'm basically off inside, and I've got my laptop with me, and I'll continue working until it's sort of dinner time, and I have to start that stuff. But, you know, there's a period at the end of the day where, you know, my attention is diverted, and I think I've had to let a lot of people know about that, and that'd be quite a useful thing to have as a, you know, just for awareness in all my communications. You know, at the back end of the day, I'm less available, you know, and that's made up for at other times or whatnot. There's ways around it. It's fine, but just, you know, people have different situations now at this point, you know, in COVID. So it's quite a useful, you know, we're not all sat at the desk 9 to 5. So to be able to tell people what your sort of circumstances are without having to sort of go through it, talk about it at great length, you know, habitually might be quite a useful thing to have. Okay, so yeah, I mean, we move on to the sort of what to use when kind of stuff then. So Mark, you said you had a diagram. Yeah,
so carry on talking whilst I try and share, but hopefully this is coming up on the recording, and this is a Microsoft graphic, and I was quite cynical about it for a while. It felt to me like, well, there's too many tools in there, and if I take my IT consultant hat off and you know, just think of myself as an end user, you know, this comes back to the very reason we're having this conversation about what to use when, but as we've started to live and breathe this, it makes more sense. So this is the thing we were talking about earlier with you know, if you look at the left hand side there, we've got Teams and we've got an inner loop for people that you work with regularly. So you know, the way that we use that inside Visual is that might be an organizational team. So you know, I've got responsibility for a group of architects within the consulting group. So we have a team for consulting, and we have a channel for architects. And the people who are in that team are actually organizationally aligned with that area. But I'm also a member of teams for the various client projects that I'm on, or even internal projects as well. So you know, that lets me focus with a group of individuals around a particular thing. You know, we're working together to produce an outcome. Or as the graphic says, you know, it's about running effective meetings and projects. On the other side, you've got the sort of informing people and engaging employees. So that's, you know, your corporate communications, the well-being, the diversity things, the things that are really important, but generally not urgent. And then, you know, Gavin mentioned, you know, technical news and other things that are of interest. I think Abby mentioned social things, you know. All of that stuff is a bit broader, so the people that you connect with across the organisation, and Yammer's really good for that. And there was a time when Yammer just felt like it wasn't being invested in by Microsoft, but it's had a big push recently, and it's very much part of the Microsoft 365 story now. Now, at the bottom of the circle, we've got Outlook and email, and like Gavin, I have a bit of a, it's not quite a hatred, I have a love-hate relationship with email. Email was what I built my career on for many years, and you know, so I was the email consultant who didn't like email. It has a place though, and it tends to get abused, and you know, in the past people have used it as their filing system, and you know, everything has happened in email. And the danger is that somebody sends you something in an email and they expect it to have just been handed over, and what they've effectively done is thrown something over the wall, and your inbox is a to-do list managed by other people, and that's a really inefficient way of working. So the point here is about using email for targeted communications. Sometimes you need to communicate with some people who are not in your inner loop, so that it's not a team that you're working with regularly, and it needs to be more targeted than just sticking something on a community in Yammer, and that's where email fits in. And unfortunately, as Karen mentioned, sometimes you can't do the IM conversation with IM being instant messaging. You can't have that conversation with somebody because they're not federated with you, or their own restrictions or whatever prevent you from IMing them. So email becomes the sort of lowest common denominator communication. And then right in the middle of that, we've got SharePoint, Stream, some of the other Microsoft 365 tools. They help us collaborate, and all of these things integrate with SharePoint and Stream and other Microsoft 365 tools, so that you can expose SharePoint sites in Teams. You can have Office 365 groups appearing in Outlook. There's the little hooks everywhere. So SharePoint is where things live. OneDrive is another example, and then these other tools that work around the outside, they sort of plug into that. And that little monologue has gone on for 2 or 3 minutes, but hopefully that sort of explains the Microsoft view of how these things should work together, and a little bit of experience of what I've found from trying to work this way.
Yeah, and I think if anyone's questioning when they've got a piece of knowledge or information, I think the main question to ask yourself is who's going to benefit from this.
Yes.
So who is it? Just going to be your team members? Is it just going to be the project team? Then that's fine, that stays in Teams. But will this information be useful across the organisation or across different communities? Then that's when you start to think, well, should that actually be in Yammer?
Yeah, and we've had some real positive results when we've said to people, when they've posted something in a team, for instance, in consulting, and I've said, well, this would also be useful to our managed service colleagues, so why don't you stick it on Yammer? And it's just, it's useful to everybody. People are generally happy to be guided in that direction.
And that's why we've got the champion group.
There you go. Yammer
I
champions.
just wanted to add something to that a little bit. So I was thinking about it when you were talking kind of about your pet peeves. Obviously, being in marketing, we quite like to work face to face with people and almost have like whiteboard sessions so we can share all of our ideas, and sometimes they're maybe a bit too out there, but we can work on them and develop them together. And obviously, with everything that's happened with COVID and having to work remotely, that's kind of taken that aspect away from the marketing team. As you guys will know, primarily we worked in the office every day, so it's kind of shifted our normal way of working, I suppose, and moved us into a completely different direction. And we've had to kind of overcome the challenges which prevent us from working collaboratively together, but in the right way, and trying to find new ways of working, but still having the same, or if not better, outcome. So I think kind of Teams and Yammer, for example, have been absolutely amazing in this aspect, especially for the marketing team. We, case studies, for example, we do really struggle to get that content together and share it quickly. But having Yammer, we get the right support from everybody in the business now. It's not just something that marketing necessarily have to sit there and chase X amount of people. We have people that actually just share that content every single day now, and it's brilliant. It gives us chance to collaborate with other people in the business rather than just, cherry picking a few people here and there. We can do kind of more work at once, I guess, which I know doesn't necessarily appeal to everybody, but having all these different stories in the background, it just helps us build our pipeline to start working through. And I think things like Yammer and Teams have just allowed the marketing team especially to feel like we still have that office environment but remotely.
That's good to hear, because introverts like me are only too happy to sit at home and not talk to anybody, but I do understand that other people are far more sociable, and creativity is a process as well.
So on that process, we're talking about sort of what to use when a few times, but I mean, I don't think this is particularly necessarily changed an awful lot, but it's just interesting to sort of keep the conversation going. So I don't know if you can all see the whiteboard there. But I've just thrown up a few of the tools that we've been talking about. So OneDrive, SharePoint, Yammers, Teams. You said to-dos, but you didn't actually call out to-do/planner. But I thought I'd add those to the list. Any other sort of tools that you think would be good to go on there? Anything I've missed?
Well, there's one that's in the wings waiting to come in, which kind of goes with to do and planner, and that's lists. But that's just something to just put in there for awareness at the moment. I think the whiteboard app that you're using right now is probably worthy of mention. It's interesting that Molly mentioned whiteboarding as something that the marketing team do. An architect, I generally run a sweepstake on how long it would be before I'd stand up in a meeting and start drawing on a whiteboard, and it's been like having one arm cut off these last 6 months. So and there are whiteboarding capabilities built into Teams and a standalone app as well. I know some people like to use third-party apps because they think that there's additional capabilities or whatever, but we're trying to use the whiteboard app more and more. This call is an example of that.
So one of the things I wanted to go through was like a typical workflow. So there's one I sort of generally, there should be a nicer word than this, but I typically regurgitate this story because it just sort of demonstrates the flow of information across these things. So you're an individual working in an organization, and you have an idea for a thing, right? So that might be something that you create in OneNote or in a Word document in your OneDrive or whatever, but it stays within your sort of personal area for that initial sort of kernel of an idea. And then maybe that percolates, you elaborate on it, maybe it matures in your own mind, you get to a point where you're ready to share it with somebody. So let's say, Mark, I call you and say, hey Mark, let's have a call. Maybe I do some screen sharing and I discuss this idea with you, and maybe you say, Gavin, that's ridiculous, forget about it. Or maybe you go, that's really cool, let's think about that. Maybe I'll go away, maybe I'll do some work on it, and at some point it's kind of, okay, this is kind of ready for prime time now, so let's take this to the whole team, present it, let's see how they think about it. So maybe at that point, maybe we could do that on our sort of team call, some sort of regular meeting, or maybe I put it into the file section for a given team and people can review it directly in there. And at that point, it's then being stored in SharePoint. So although we're looking at it in Teams, there's that SharePoint site behind that. So at some stage, we're going to get this idea that it's turned into, let's say, a product at this point, or a process. We're saying, okay, this is now ready for wider consumption. At that point, so far it's all resided either individually on my OneDrive or within a private Teams group. But if we're now saying that I probably need another box here, so let's say there's a SharePoint, like an intranet, sort of SharePoint intranet. Let's say there's like an intranet page or a public page that we're posting to. So at that point, the collateral or the public collateral is moved to the intranet. And from there, I think this is where some things can fall down sometimes. So I don't have Outlook on this page. Nobody picked up that I didn't have Outlook. Isn't that interesting? No, it's going over the internet. Can I move that? There you go, intranet. So that can be Outlook down there. So you post stuff to the intranet. Whiteboard here. There you go. So you post stuff to the intranet, and then it kind of gets a bit sporadic from there. So for me, there should always be like a circular process of linking on these things. So we've posted stuff to the internet, but we don't really know if people are engaging that, if they've seen it, whatever. So we want to get the message out there. So how do we do that? So traditionally, we'd be sending an email in Outlook. So that's my email. So in there, we'd have probably a link back to that internet content. We'll print this up later. So the other place now we've also got now for getting the message out there is Yammer. So we could have some sort of community in Yammer that these sorts of messages go to. Could be all company, could be something else. And then on that internet content as well, I said circular linking. So that there should also have a link back to your Yammer content. So you're making information available wherever people come across it. and then this content, whatever it is, it could be, you mentioned stream earlier on. So, this video that we're recording now is going to go to stream, or it could be, whatever it is, a whiteboard document or a OneNote file, what have you. But that sort of takes you through the process of where information sits and gets shared as you move through the different tools and through the timeline of that sort of activity.
That's a really good description, Gavin. So I think the only two things I can see on the whiteboard you didn't mention in that flow, obviously To-Do and Planner are useful tools when you're organising your time, so they can be used at various points. And yeah, the whiteboard might get used in ad hoc discussions. So I think that's pretty much everything on your diagram covered off.
That thing about the To-Do and Planner, so that's been a bugbear of mine for years, probably everyone else here as well. So there's been 100 different apps where you could have to-dos, and I never used any of them because it was just too much of a pain in the bum to sort of manage some information here, some information there. I'm still, that's my life in here. I'm still an analog note taker. That's how I manage my to-dos. But it looks like we're just around the corner from having all of this stuff consolidated. So the To-Do app, or I think it's going to be called Tasks in Teams, is going to consolidate across all these different things. So To-Do, Outlook, Tasks, Planner, it's all going to be under that one app, which is going to be amazing.
Yeah, it's already happening. So I just started to use, I had a new Get Myself Organised push, which has kicked off this week. And I've noticed that the To-Do app now asks me, do I want to import my actions from Planner? And it's on the back end, it's populating tasks in Outlook. So, it may not be perfect, but a lot of that integration is there and ready to go.
Cool stuff. Yeah. So planners, I think Planner is something I used when Teams first came. Well, I think before Teams came out. Yes, Planner was around before. And I remember looking at it thinking that's pretty good because it's kind of, we've all used Project before. Some people really get into it, and good for them. But it's a lot. So I think Project Planner is one of those sort of neat things that's kind of human digestible, as I call it. So if that's something that's going to get more use because of this sort of better integration, that's going to be a good thing.
Yeah, and Planner, some people listening to this might not be familiar with it, but they might have used Trello or other tools to help them manage a Kanban. And the idea being that you've got activities that can be placed in buckets and moved across as they progress. One challenge we've found is that perhaps if you've got multiple people who each need to do a thing, it needs to be multiple tasks for individuals, because the first one who marks it as complete, that's it, it's complete. And that's possibly where we need to think a little bit about how To-Do works on an individual level with Planner on a sort of more project or activity level. But yeah, it's worth noting all of these tools are included within Microsoft 365 licenses. There is no reason to go out and buy a third-party tool. And indeed, I've just been doing some work with a client who is looking to save some money. Their shops have been closed as a result of the pandemic. They've got a big hole in their finances, and one of the things that we're able to help them with is identifying where they've got applications and functionality that's crossing over, and they're effectively double licensing. So what can we do to get them out of that situation?
And also that sort of integration story for me is always been the Microsoft benefit. In any particular case, there might be an individual application that might be best of breed, but in terms of integration, I've always that's why I've always stayed towards Microsoft solutions just generally, because it just makes life so much easier. But yeah, okay, we're coming up to the sort of 30-minute mark, so I'm sort of thinking I'm kind of done here from the points I was sort of hoping to get across. Is there anything else that anybody had, like any other tips or thoughts or like processes you might want to talk about?
I just wanted to touch on the pet peeves a little bit. And you mentioned your hatred of email. I posted something a few days ago, and I don't know, it made Karen chuckle when she saw it in my status. But the idea of using Teams efficiently. So we talked about email and how it shouldn't become an unmanaged to-do list, but Teams, particularly Teams chat, the instant messaging piece, the emphasis there is on instant, and therefore, you know, take note of people's status. If they are busy, or Abby mentioned, you know, if she's on focus time, it will show as do not disturb. So hey, maybe don't disturb, you know. You know, just having respect for people's availability, and a note that pops up and says, "Hey, Mark," and then you go, "Okay, right, yeah, you've got my attention now,"
and then don't respond for about 2 hours.
Yeah, so and so is typing. It's just like I'm then waiting. You know, it's just think about how you use these tools really. So, hey, Mark, I've got this problem. Have you got 5 minutes for a call? Is much better than, hey, Mark, and then a gap, and then how are you doing, and then a gap, and then can you have a call?
That used to really wind me up, and I always used to notice that. But what I've noticed myself doing now, since you've called that out, is I'm much more mindful to be quick on the follow-up. Like I used to say hello and then start typing, but I'm like, oh, I've got to type quicker.
I just don't do the pleasantries. I don't start with hello. I just get my point across. Maybe I'm the opposite verse. I just want to get it done out the way.
I've worked with you for years, Abby. I know how it is. So I don't take it
short, sharp, to the point. Off we go.
Yeah.
No pleasantries.
I'm a bit like that, and then your respondent starts with some pleasantries, and I thought, oh, okay, I've got to go back and then be pleasant. But yes, Mark, I did enjoy your little what can I call it? Your little piece.
Well, I mean, it's not my work either. You know, I linked to some people, you know, who've put up the, you know, what the problem is and their solution to it. So if anybody wants to, we can probably put some links out with this podcast, but aka.ms/no-hello or /no-social might tell you a bit more.
No hello. I love those aka.ms links.
Yeah.
And if I hear another customer say that Yammer's dead and Microsoft are going to get rid of it,
that's your pet peeve, isn't it, Abby?
Yes.
Definitely. Yeah.
It may have been the case once. It certainly looked that way, but it's had a lot of new life breathed into it recently.
It's really, I mean, for my sort of security soapbox, I mean, you know, if you're going to deploy something like Enforce MFA for a whole organization, you know, you've got that level of change that's going on. It's a really good way of getting an email. Is just so it's one-sided. You know, you send an all company email, and typically people don't sort of respond to it, or the responses don't get seen or shared, whatever. But you do it in Yammer, and you can have a thread there going, and people can see what's been said and engage in the conversation. It's so much better for those all company sort of scenarios.
And we've seen it work really well in adoption and change, that there's almost a live Q&A forum in Yammer, so people, rather than having to phone help desk, they can ask champions questions or share their knowledge. So you're building that knowledge base for yourself rather than people.
Yeah, definitely. And that sort of service desk point is good as well, isn't it? Because that's typically, if you're going to make some sort of change, the instant is, oh, service desk needs to be prepared. Well, yeah, they still need to be prepared, but also, you know, the team who built the thing can be available on Yammer to answer the questions as well. You know, so it's a much, and then you get a sort of not better, you know, not necessarily a better response, no sort of dispersions on service desks, but you know, the teams who build these things are going to be able to provide much sort of deeper, better answers. So yeah, cool. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up there. So thank you very much, everybody, for your time. What we'll do is we'll get these sort of notes tidied up, and we'll probably share something alongside this this podcast as we share it. So yeah, look forward to that.
And we'll thank our listeners, assuming we have some listeners, for the last half hour of listening. You can find out more at Risual.com. You can find us on all our various social channels. Just search for Risual. And one last point before we sign off: it's all right to wave, isn't it, in video calls?
I use the lift technique. See you later. Cheers, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.